want to shout out and say thank you to Stephanie Sabin and Ryan Peterson. Stephanie and Ryan are doing our signage over here, and it's warm. They're committed, and we do that. Speaking first this afternoon is the president of the Service Employees International Union, Local 199. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, if you will, please, Kathy Glasson.
He's taller than I am. How you doing, corn feed? I don't hear you out there. How you doing? I want to thank Matt and all the sponsors of A Great Corn Feed. And we have a beautiful day here in Iowa. But I want to take a minute because on our beautiful day here, there are millions of Americans who are suffering today. And I want to start by acknowledging our brothers and sisters who are going through their own life and death situation in Florida, and the families starting to recover in Texas, and the Oregonians who've been struggling to contain wildfires in their state. We've seen big parts of our country literally getting ripped apart by these storms and climate-related disasters. But our country, torn open by Mother Nature, we've seen America's heart. The Florida man who gave up the last generator at a Home Depot store because he met a woman who needed it more than he did, because her father needed oxygen and life-sustaining equipment. The Texans that we all saw in their kayaks, their fishing boats, their rowboats, rescuing their neighbors, risking their own lives to make sure no one in their community was left behind. You know, as an intensive care unit nurse, I've watched with pride my fellow nurses, doctors, hospital workers, and first responders who stand in the eye of the storm to give all of their neighbors a fighting chance. And we've also witnessed the decency and the humanity of our fellow Iowans right here, sending food and supplies to Houston for the dogs and the cats who are homeless and hurt, sending water and essential supplies to families who have lost everything, heading down to those states to volunteer at shelters, and medical personnel driving over 15,000 miles to answer the call for help. Through all of this, we are all reminded why government and public service matters. That fully funding our health and human services saves lives. Let's face it, folks, you can't privatize a disaster. While we're fighting back in Iowa against an attack on our public workers, we're seeing in this crisis that those workers are true public servants. Public employees are the hometown heroes who really make America great. And if we want them to be there for us, we need to be there for them. My name is Kathy Glasson, and I believe that the #1 job of a governor is to raise wages and improve the standard of living for all Iowans. And let's face it, ladies and gentlemen, this governor, Kim Reynolds, isn't getting that job done very well. We have 381,000 households in our state that struggle to pay their monthly bills, and 2/3 of the jobs in our state pay less than $20 an hour. The unemployment rate may be low, but the misery index is high. I've been traveling our state, whether it's from Dubuque to Moravia, from Milford, Iowa to Keokuk, Iowa. And what I've been listening to Iowans and hearing over and over is that they feel forgotten and left out. Left behind by a rigged economy that hasn't worked for them and their families for decades. Cheated by politicians who are bought and paid for by big corporations and CEOs. Hurt by a healthcare system that costs too much, cares too little, and puts profits at the top before patients every single time. You know, the Iowans I'm listening to are sick and tired of getting beat up, and they're ready to rise up for bold progressive change in 2018. They don't want half measures. They want big, bold, new ideas to move our state forward. They're ready to rise up for $15 minimum wage. They're ready to rise up for expanded union rights. They're ready to rise up for universal single-payer health care. And they're ready to rise for clean water, safe communities, and a solid quality public education for our teachers and our kids, K through 12 and higher education. Ladies and gentlemen, we can win in 2018 if we listen to Iowa and build a bold, progressive future together. My name is Kathy Glosson. That's why I'm running for governor. Join the movement. Thank you.
Kathy Glosson, ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it. There you go. Want some fire, right? You got some. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to introduce to you Fred Hubble. Fred is a businessman, community leader, and a first-time politician. Ladies and gentlemen, Fred Hubble.
I thought that was a typo, this corn feed over here. Isn't it corn fed? Sorry, Matt. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being here today. It's a nice, beautiful day. It is a little warm, so thank you for taking your time to be with us. I, too, just want to remind everybody, right here in 1993, this was underwater. Under a lot of water. And in 2008, Cedar Rapids, the whole river, the whole downtown was underwater. And those folks in California, and Texas, and Florida, they helped us out. So we need to think about them, and we need to help them out. So I encourage you to contact Red Cross and other groups. So I actually am a fifth-generation Iowan. My great-great-grandfather came here at the age of 16, just a couple blocks down the street here when the train stopped. He had to get off there because that's as far as the train would go. 12 years later, he and a bunch of local people started a business right here in Iowa, Equitable Life Insurance Company of Iowa. And the reason they did that was because a lot of insurance companies from the East Coast were doing business here, and people like us were paying premiums that they took out east. So Iowa money was being used to build the East Coast. And they figured out that that doesn't make any sense. You want to build your economy with your own local money. So they started an insurance company right here, the first one west of the Mississippi, and all the premiums were invested right here in Iowa. That's the way you build a business. You invest in your hometown people, and your hometown businesses. And you know what? Our governor up here and the legislature, 150 years later, are making the same mistake by taking all the money that we are paying as taxes and putting it out of state companies that don't pay taxes, but they get a refundable tax credit, so we're writing them checks. $45 million a year, ladies and gentlemen, goes out of Iowa to write checks for out-of-state businesses, even though they pay no taxes. 150 years later, we're making the same mistakes. That's not good government. You know what else? Back in the 1980s, I was one of the people running the Yonkers department store business all across Iowa. Well, you might remember in the 80s, we had a big, serious farm crisis. A lot of farmers were in deep trouble. Many of them were going out of business. Many of them were going bankrupt. What Yonkers did was we had stores all across the state. We had a lot of employees, and we had a lot of customers that were suffering from that. So we decided we needed to do something to help the community, because that's what good employers do, and that's what good CEOs do, is they help the community. They invest in people. So we started the Farm Aid Relief Concerts with Willie Nelson. They were here for the next 5 or 6 years, raising funds for the local farmers to be able to help keep them on their farms so they didn't have to go bankrupt. That's what good businesses do. That's what good leaders do. A few years later, I was running Equitable Life Insurance Company, the one I mentioned a few minutes ago. I was approached by the woman that was running Planned Parenthood. You hear that, ladies? Planned Parenthood. The woman that was running that was having trouble getting into Dubuque. A lot of people were trying to get services for Planned Parenthood into Dubuque. Nobody up there would rent them a building or sell them a building. So they came to myself and my wife and they said, is there something you can do to help? We can't get up there and a lot of people need our services. So we thought about it, we looked around, we tried to figure it out. We helped them open in Dubuque. We got them a building. A couple months later, they were up in business, serving hundreds of people in Dubuque. Pretty soon it became thousands of people in Dubuque. That's what stepping up to provide leadership is all about. That's what leadership is, what we need in Iowa. But you know what? These same people who were sending the money out of state, they defunded Planned Parenthood, so now those clinics all across eastern Iowa have been closed. That's not what we want. That's not the kind of leadership that we need. So what do I want to do as governor? What I want to do is, first of all, put our budget behind the priorities. Because they talk about priorities over here and they put the budget money over there. And that's not how you make anything work. Our priorities should be education, healthcare, and raising incomes for all Iowans all across our state. And if we put the budget behind that, and we put the same kind of scrutiny on tax credits, tax deductions for business that they are putting on human service programs, there's a lot of money that we can free up to invest in education, healthcare, and raising incomes all across our state with a much smarter economic development program. It's not all that complicated. We just need a leader who knows how to do it, and a leader who's not beholden to special interests, not worried about re-election, but's willing to get in there, tackle the budget, put the money behind the people, not behind the failed tax breaks, and invest in our country, and invest in our state. Because our people are our best asset. That's why we need to invest in education, because that raises incomes for everybody. That's why we need to invest in healthcare, because then people can be productive workers, and they can also be much more comfortable, much more confident at home with their families and their kids, which makes a big difference in those kids going to school and them going to work in the morning. So if you're interested in joining our campaign to make Iowa the kind of place it used to be, the kind of place it can be, please find the person over here in the green shirt. We'd love to have you sign up. We have a lot of volunteers here. We're anxious to get a lot more. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
One more time for Fred Hubble. What do you think? Ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege to introduce to you well, he worked on Governor Vilsack's staff as chief of staff. And he's a great friend of Iowa. He moved back here to do this. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the podium, John Norris.
Thank you very much. Great to be with so many progressives. Matt, thanks for your leadership. Progress Iowa, and all these great organizations up here. I hope you'll take time to check in with their booths. I've worked with many of them over the years, and a special shout out to the Climate Lobby, our Citizens Climate Lobby. As we talk about, thank you. As we talk about the impact of global climate change, and its now real impact on people's lives, it's time we do something about climate change and address that issue. I'm familiar with all these organizations because I've been fighting with the lobby for many years. When I worked for Tom Harkin, I was proud of his leadership on the Americans with Disabilities Act and what that meant for empowering so many Americans and justice for them. When I marched with Cesar Chavez in California to help bring environmental justice to migrant workers. When I marched with Paul Wellstone in Seattle at the battle in Seattle against WTO and its harm to American workers and small businesses. When I worked with Tom Vilsack and the Vision Iowa to bring hope to rural communities. When I worked in the energy sector as the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission with my directive from President Obama to increase renewable energy across this country. Mine has been a life of progressive values and fights all my life. And like every one of you, I am worried about the direction of this state today and so many people being left behind by a careless, insensitive governor and legislature that has literally abandoned our children, assaulted workers, neglected our environment, and been disrespectful to women, and we must change that in our state government. It's about priorities. And they made it pretty clear what their priorities are, as you recognize this prop I have with me today. You know, we went from a nearly $1 billion surplus in this state to now a $350 million deficit. We have robbed our children in education. We've robbed our most vulnerable by this privatization of Medicaid and now the 90-day rollback and the pressure that's puts on our most vulnerable citizens and our hospitals, and particularly rural hospitals. Our government workers were stripping away collective bargaining rights and now overtime pay. Not dealing with our clean water problem in this state, our dirty water problem in this state, and conservation that is bedrock to our future and our value of love for the land. They've done all that at the expense for handouts for special interests and the power of wealthy corporate lobbyists. And we saw an example recently in Iowa. I think it's great that Apple is here. But it's not great that we're giving them taxpayer money for one of the wealthiest corporations in the world while we're not funding education, we're not cleaning up our water, we're not addressing the health care needs of Iowans. So now we got them right where we want them. Right where we want them. They don't have any more millions of dollars to hand out to their wealthy special interests. They don't know how to govern now. They didn't in the first place. They can't do the only thing they know, which is hand out special favors to their wealthy friends. And Iowans want to change. They want a government that looks out for workers, looks out for children, our most vulnerable people, and paints a brighter future for everyone in our state. And let me close with this. When I announced my candidacy for governor, I started in Storm Lake, Iowa, because I wanted to talk about what it means to have a governor with vision. And yes, I chose a Republican governor, Governor Ray, who understood Iowans were a welcoming state, and we embrace people who need help and lift them up, as he did with the Southeast Asian refugees after the Vietnam War. He understood Iowans. Those folks in charge now do not. I just traveled to Northwest Iowa the last 2 days, and every community is looking for workers. There's a worker shortage. But we're trying to drive out of this state our new Iowans who are a part of our future. It's time we embrace our new Iowans and paint a future that's bright for them, but also needed for our entire state. I hope you'll do all you can to be visible and raise your voices against DACA, and be visible and raise your voices to Iowans about the need to support our new Iowans. They are a part of our future. Our governor should lead that. When I'm governor, I can tell you I will be down there at that vigil that we had in Des Moines, and our governor was absent, to look out for our new Iowans and the people who need us to step up. Step up for our future. Step up for the welcoming Iowa values that we have. That's what we need in a leader of this state, because Iowans are leaders. And in the backdrop of Charlottesville, let's have Iowa be the state that leads this country to standing up for those people who need us to stand up for them. That's what being a leader is all about. I know Iowans want that in ourselves. Help me do that. John Norris for governor. Thank you very much. Now, if you excuse me, I can catch the second half of my son's football game. Thank you very much.
We had a switch up in the lineup, so John's off to a football game. John, thank you very much for doing that, and good luck and safe travels. Our next candidate to visit with us is an independent. You may have seen him on the television, you may have seen him in his blogs. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Brent Roski. Brent?
Hi everybody, huge thanks to Matt and Progress Iowa. This is my third Progress Iowa event. I filmed for the show with Representative Loebsack, Senator Harkin here, presidential candidates. I am a fan of this event and a fan of this group. I see a lot of friends here today, and some folks who think that I'm not your friend anymore because I'm running as an independent. I want to explain that. I'm running as an independent, not against the Democrat Party, not against the Republican Party or against the Libertarian Party, but I'm running as another avenue to get progressive and Democrat and independent ideas into the State House. If you look at the last few years, these elections, Democrats in particular have had good candidates who've run good races, but for whatever reason didn't get into the office. So what I want to do is I want to spell out the 3 simple reasons why I've decided to run for governor and specifically run as an independent. Now I look over there, my friends at CCI Action Fund, I've got 2 of my 3 issues on their table. The first one, I don't know about you folks, but I think this country is ready for single-payer health care. What do you think? Yeah. I think our health care in this country is as screwed up as our politics can get sometime. I'm going to go into health care in just a second, but the second issue I want to talk to you about, their sign up there says, Iowans deserve clean water. I think we do. What do you think? Yeah. My wife Dana and I just got married in May. And the reason clean water is important to us is we're trying to start a family. We had the water, the folks selling water come out to the house, and I said, I want you to check it for nitrates, because as you know, or you might not know, nitrates cause thyroid cancer, they cause birth defects. The guy from Culligan said you're showing twice the legal limit, so that alarmed us. So we had the folks in from Des Moines Waterworks come down, and they said, no, it's fine, you're within the legal limit. I said, well, what's the legal limit? They said, well, you're at 8 parts per million. Legal limit is 10. I said, okay, let me rephrase the question. If it was your wife or your daughter or your mother wanting to conceive a child, have a child, would you say drink the tap water in Des Moines? He said, well, you're gonna have to answer that question yourself. So every month we spend $54 to have drinking water come to our house here, about 10 blocks that way. Did you know in Los Angeles right now, if you turn on the tap, the water that comes out of it is cleaner than bottled water you buy at the store in Los Angeles? Not the case in Iowa. And I'm going to say something a lot of politicians don't in this state. Now, I don't want to alienate farmers. We got to keep agriculture going strong in this state. The top 2 revenue makers in this state are agriculture and manufacturing for agriculture, but I'm going to say it, that agriculture puts nitrates in the water in Iowa. And if we're going to fight it, if we're going to solve it, we have to start with that simple fact. Now, I'm the only person running for governor that will say this statement. I will not sign a bill, if I'm elected governor, before a clean water bill hits my desk. I think it's the most important thing facing Iowans right now. The third reason that I'm running specifically as an independent is because I feel that the current warring factions form of government that we do, warring factions in the legislature, both at the state and national levels, you got team play. It looks more like a football game. They're both battling for possession, and they're pushing that football as far down the field as they can. It's a perverse form of political pragmatism. And what I want to do is re-examine the role of the executive branch, both in state and federal governments. I think the quickest way to improve our politics is to put an independent in the executive branch. If you went to a football game and the referee was actually an MVP of one of the players, you'd say, well, that's not a fair game. So I'm running as an independent. Did you know we've already had an independent president? It was George Washington. And both George Washington and John Adams actually spoke out against political parties. They thought that they might be destructive to American government, that people would be so consumed with creating a power structure in the political parties that they would forget what they were there to do in the first place. So back to healthcare. Did you know that right now, if you are expecting a child, the odds are that infant mortality rates are lower in Cuba right now than the United States? It's a shame, isn't it? As a proud American patriot, that's just not okay with me. We spend more per patient than every other country in the world, but we don't get the results. So, single payer, the time has come. I think it's an inevitable. As governor of Iowa, certainly this is a national issue, but I would do everything I could to advocate for single payer health care. Again, number 2, clean water for Iowa. We have to do everything we can to provide clean water to every Iowan house. And third issue, improve American politics. Re-examine the role of the executive branch by putting an independent in the governor's seat. I am happy to be speaking here today. I appreciate the opportunity, and if you're looking to support my candidacy or already supporting my candidacy, thank you. But since I'm running as an independent, I'll be on the ballot in November, and if your candidate up here by chance doesn't make it there, I hope you think about voting for an independent. Roski for Iowa is the website. Thanks so much.
Fred Roski, ladies and gentlemen. Now we're going to turn the page and welcome to the podium the former mayor of Iowa City. Recently announced, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ross Wilburn. Ross?
Hello, Iowa. Hello. All right, good to see you. My name is Ross Wilburn, and I've been living in Ames for the past 3 years, 30 years in Iowa City before that, and I went to junior high and high school in Davenport. And I feel fortunate to have lived and grown up in Iowa and to serve the people of Iowa, doing so now at Iowa State University Extension and Outreach in Community Economic Development, and I'm their diversity officer. I was also pleased to have served Iowa City as mayor and a 12-year council member. My third month in as mayor was when the tornado hit, and we dealt with tornadoes and floods, and so you don't have to, while our hearts are in Texas and Florida and out west, you don't have to look too far beyond Iowa to find the dramatic effects of climate change. So I'm looking forward to working with you, all of us together, to try and take action that we all want to see in Iowa. We want to see a strong, sustainable economy. We want to see clean water. We want to pay attention to our natural resources. We want good health care. We want a strong education system. And my message, our message to Iowa is let's be Iowa. Let's be Iowa. No matter how you feel about fireworks and whether they should be shot off here in Iowa or not, fireworks didn't create a sustainable job. It didn't get anybody's health care back. It didn't address the mental health system. It didn't clean up our water. And so we need to recapture the Senate, the House, and get a Democrat in Terrace Hill. We can do that. We can do that. As we've all been traveling around Iowa, Iowans want a healthy Iowa. They want a prosperous Iowa. They want a welcoming, inclusive Iowa. A healthy Iowa, Iowans have said it's a right. Healthcare is a right, and we need that single-payer plan. We can do that. We can do that if we make a difference here in Des Moines on the ballot in December, as well as the ballot starting next week with school boards and November with city councils. Don't forget those. They're very important. And it's not just our physical health, it's our mental health. Closing down mental health centers without a plan for families and individuals to get support at the community level is not Iowa. That's not who we are. We are better than that. Yeah. And it can't just be about our physical and mental health. It's got to be about our environmental health. What good does it do if we can't drink the water and breathe clean air? We can do this. We can do this together. A more prosperous Iowa. How about starting with that $15 livable wage? Not for extravagant things, but to help Iowans pay for everyday living things, have that money circulate out the local economies. How about let's invest in corporations and businesses that invest in Iowa, in Iowans. They don't fight efforts to collectively bargain, which we need to restore those rights. They don't make, yeah, thank you. They don't ask for something in return without giving back to us. Let's make those investments in corporations that short-term, that give back to us. And an inclusive, welcoming Iowa. Governor Ray in the 70s in Iowa did welcome folks from Southeast Asia. And that was an Iowa thing to do. But it's not just DACA, it's folks from around the world who are contributing to our local economies, who are contributing to the state of Iowa. We need to get back to being a welcoming Iowa. And so those messages that we've been seeing around the country, those voices and faces of hate, imagine having to go and apply for a job with someone. Imagine going to apply for a loan with someone that you saw with those messages of hate, seeing someone at work. My message to Iowa is let's get back to being Iowa. We are a welcoming state. We can push through those messages of hate, but it's going to take all of us speaking out. We've got to show love, and we've got to choose a better message than hate. We can do that. I need you to help us help Iowans choose a better message than hate. You see, it's not just about diversity and inclusion. They are important, but it's not just about that. It's about a welcoming, friendly, encouraging Iowa. We want to have an Iowa where there's economic opportunity for all, so that we are getting back to those Iowa values. Can we do better? Can we do better than that, Iowa? We can do better. Let's be Iowa. Let's be Iowa. Come on, thank you. Appreciate your help. Go Democrats.
Nicely done. Ladies and gentlemen, let's make welcome the former president of the Des Moines School Board, John Niederbach. John?
Good afternoon. Great crowd here today. Delicious food, great groups back against the railing. Lots of information being shared, and obviously soon the opportunity to hear some folks who well may be the next President of the United States. Pretty exciting day. I'm John Niederbach, and I'm running for governor. Many of you may have voted for me in 2014 and don't recall it. I was a nominee for state auditor, down ticket, not something that people really focus on. I frankly had planned to not do politics again after that election. It's a lot of interesting experience running in a statewide race, but I wasn't sure I wanted to bite it off again. And then frankly, all the awful things of this past session started happening. And it was clear that our state finances were going downhill real fast. And I got the strong impression that I needed to jump in to raise a bunch of issues that were not going to be raised otherwise. There's an awful lot of agreement among the strong field we have on a lot of issues. There are some differences here and there, and whether or not you should raise $15 an hour immediately, something I think we should do. We'll wait a while. Whether or not you should have Medicare for all at the state level, single payer, and do it with a consortium of states, not wait for the feds, like I think we should do, or whether we should wait for the federal government. There's a lot of how we should finance and improve our water, whether or not we should go with the statewide sales tax, or make the polluters pay, like I think we should do. Basic economics. If we spread the costs of a problem among everybody, there's very little incentive to change behavior. But frankly, that isn't why I'm running. Those are important things, but you never can tell how that's all going to roll out. What really makes me angry is we need to, as a party, recognize voters are fed up and they know that the system is rigged against them. I traveled the state for state auditor campaign in 2014, and when you're running for state auditor, what can you ask people? There aren't a lot of issues. You ask folks, how do you think government is working? And boy, do you get an earful. You ask people, how should government be done better? And you get more of an earful. People, and also since I've announced in March, I've also got an earful of people. It is clear people are fed up and they understand what an awful lot of politicians don't. That the political system is rigged, that the economic system is rigged, and frankly, something very dear to my heart as a lawyer, that the legal system is rigged. I'll toss out one example as far as the legal system. Political and economic, I think we've already heard some great examples. But the legal system is rigged. If you write a bad check 3 times, you'll probably wind up in prison. First you'll get probation, then you get jail, then you wind up in prison. If you get 3 credit cards and don't pay them and declare bankruptcy, you're not going to go to prison. Heck, if you do it enough times, you become president. That illustrates how wrong our system is. And that pervades the entire system. It was just a study done by the ACLU that African Americans in Iowa are 8.34 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana. Now, I don't think there's a big difference in the use of marijuana among African Americans and not. Our whole legal system, our whole economic system, our political system, from top to bottom, is rigged. Upper income people pay less of their income in taxes than lower income people. It shouldn't be right. It shouldn't work that way. I will be somebody, my whole life, I have never been afraid to challenge the status quo. From working for Gene McCarthy when I was 12, to fighting against the sales tax that was proposed for Polk County a few years ago, that would have hurt low-income people in order to give rich folks a property tax decrease. I have never been afraid to challenge the status quo. I have never been afraid to go against the powerful and the people with money. I will not be afraid to do that as your governor. I also have an extensive experience. I know how Iowa government works. 15 years working as staff in the legislative branch, 15 years working in the executive branch. I member of a school board before and a year as president of an Des Moines school board. I know all the things that are broken in Iowa government, and I won't be afraid to tap the best and the brightest to challenge the status quo to get them fixed. John Niederbach, I ask for your consideration. You know, the election isn't this November. Everybody is so fired up because of Trump. You'd think the election was this November. The election isn't until June with a primary. Kick the tires, talk to the candidates. I ask your consideration, and hopefully I'll earn your support. Thank you very much.
John Niederbach, ladies and gentlemen. Now we'll hear from the former chair of the Iowa Democratic Party. Please make welcome Andy McGuire.
Hello, Democrats. Are you ready? You fired up? I'm Andy McGuire. I've seen some friends and new friends, old friends, and friends I haven't even met yet. But I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm from Waterloo. I was raised in a family of 8. I had a dad who came home from World War II and started a construction machinery business. My mom stayed home and took care of us. And, you know, I've talked to a lot of you. What I was taught when I was growing up was about caring for others. That's what they instilled in me. And they instilled that when a neighbor was sick, we went and helped him out. And when somebody in the community needed help, we all came together and got them back on their feet, like we're seeing in Texas and Florida. But, you know, I've been all over Iowa in the last 2 years, and you know what I've seen and heard? I've heard that people aren't getting a fair shake, and they're not getting ahead for their families, and they feel like the Branstad Reynolds administration is putting profits ahead of people. Is that how you feel? Well, I want to change that. I'm a doctor. I've been a doctor and caring for people my whole life, and I care about every Iowan being a success, every Iowan. That's what we ought to have in our governor. I've also heard about health care, and as a doctor, I want to say one thing. Health care is a right, not a privilege, correct? I've been listening to people about this Medicare mess. That's the nicest word I can use for it. And you know, we put 600,000 of our fellow citizens in danger of not having access to health care. Think about that. Is that the Iowa we want to be? I talked to a mom. She has a child with disabilities. She has to drive an hour and a half to get her child health care. We don't need to do that, folks. And as governor, I will make sure no mother and no person worries about access to health care in Iowa. I will make sure of it. I've talked to people who their families are struggling with mental health issues and substance abuse and addiction. I'll bet you all know somebody who's struggling. And yet we're 50th in mental health beds, 47th in mental health providers. And we've really turned our police into our first-line mental health workers. They put people in jails and in emergency rooms, 2 of the most expensive and worst places for someone in crisis. Well, I'd like to take that money and put it into counseling so that we can help people before they get to crisis. So as your governor, I will make sure there are mental health resources in every community for our struggling citizens. I've talked to some of the 15,000 women who no longer have their Planned Parenthood clinics. I've talked to them about their worries about where they're going to get their health care, where they're going to get their cancer screenings, where they're going to get their family planning. I see a lot of you with these buttons on, and I'm so glad you're here. You know what? First day in office, as a woman, as a doctor, as a mother of 5 daughters, I will restore Planned Parenthood funding that very first day. I talk to a lot of people about education, a lot of parents. You know, they worry about their kids. Some of the kids don't even have enough books so that they can have their homework, take their homework home at night. That's not the Iowa we want. We used to be a beacon for education, and we should be that again. Are there any teachers in the audience? Can you wave at me?